Vengeance Demon Hunters had kind of a rough start to Dragonflight, but they finished as the strongest tank in Mythic Plus for the last 2 seasons, and quite possibly the strongest Mythic Plus tank of all time. They could completely solo crowd controlling everything in every pack. They have genuinely made the majority of the player base worse at interrupting by being so overpowered, and Season 1 of the War Within Mythic Plus is probably going to suffer for it. But now they've been nerfed back into being just a decent, normal tank. Hi, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk about how to play Vengeance Demon Hunter in patch 11.0. The War Within is right around the corner. It is time to get hyped, but first, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's start with the changes to Demon Hunter. I've made this joke pretty much every time I talk about the class, but Vengeance Demon Hunter got their new expansion level rework and buffs early, way back in Dragonflight Season 3. That's turned out to not really be a joke at all, because there basically are no changes to the class in patch 11.0 other than one relatively small nerf and then a fairly large collection of nerfs that were applied to all tanks, and Demon Hunters have come through that with, you know, more nerfs than they had on top of what they already had gotten before, but nothing playstyle altering, nothing that affects talent choices. It's really not the end of the world. It's effectively just an aura nerf that was applied to Demon Hunters, along with all of the other tanks getting nerfed as well. No functionality changes here really at all. Alright, now I'm going to talk about talents, and this is the talent tree that Demon Hunters will generally run for Mythic Plus, especially for kind of higher level, a little bit more scary stuff, because it gives you last resort. And this is more or less the talent tree that Demon Hunters have run for the last 2 seasons, other than the hero talent tree in the middle, obviously. There's really not a lot of new fancy stuff in here. I guess one thing that is a little bit different is that Sigil of Misery is now on a longer baseline cooldown. You can potentially drop some stuff in order to shorten that cooldown a bit by 30 seconds, but you know, the availability isn't all that amazing. That's probably what I would do. There you go. Vengeful Retreat dropped, improved Sigil of Misery acquired. Great. In the class tree, there is one pretty significant nerf, and that is to Illuminated Sigils, which no longer applies to all of your other sigils. It is exactly what people had asked for a long time. You just get the one charge of Sigil of Silence, one charge of Sigil of Chains and Misery, and so on. You will get 2 charges of Sigil of Flame. They do have a reduced base cooldown, and they give you 12% increased chance to parry attacks by enemies that you've affected with that sigil. According to today's earlier nerfs, that tooltip hasn't been updated as of the time that I'm recording this. Ultimately, it's an okay talent now. It definitely lost a little bit of value compared to Down in Flames, but Down in Flames also had its cooldown reduction nerfed ever so slightly. 12 seconds of cooldown reduction instead of 15. Not a huge deal. I still think that Illuminated Sigils is better for Mythic Plus, but it's not quite so open and shut, and certainly Demon Hunter's ability to just CC everything that lives, everything that moves is reduced. Now I do also have a talent setup that I'll recommend for Raid to kind of just give the brief version of it. Basically, you're going to drop, you can drop Spirit Bomb, especially for single target stuff, and just kind of lay on your Soul Cleave. That's completely fine. And then what you're going to want to do is just kind of cut down on some of the defensive and crowd control utility stuff, you know, things like Sigil of Chains, Sigil of Silence. You're not going to be using those in Raid, so those are really not going to be necessary. You probably wouldn't need Last Resort in Raid. You would want to go with Soul Crush and really just emphasize Soul Cleaving as much as you can, getting as many Frailty stacks as you can onto bosses. Pretty much that's about all there is to it. Now, obviously, you wouldn't need all the CC stuff, Imprison, Chaos, Nova, some of those things as well. You could justify dropping, and then that would allow you to come down and get Erratic Fellheart, get yourself a bit more value here. Historically, people have taken Collective Anguish instead of Sigil of Spite, but I think in the current state of affairs, I think I probably wouldn't go that route. I think I probably would still stick with Sigil of Spite, because Darkglare Boon, the amount of cooldown reduction that it grants, has been reduced. It's been nerfed a fair amount. And so, you know, that's a little bit of a nerf that affects Collective Anguish, and they were already fairly close, so I think I would rather stick with Sigil of Spite. Also, Sigil of Spite has had a name change. Same exact thing. It used to be called Elysian Decree. Now it is actually properly named Sigil of Spite. It has Sigil in the name, which makes sense since it functions like a sigil. Alright, now let's go over abilities. Demon Hunter is kind of the pinnacle of Blizzard's Builder Spender class design. You generate Fury and Souls with Sigil of Flame, Fracture, Immolate, or Immolation Aura, I should say, and Fellblade, and then you spin them with Spirit Bomb or Soul Cleave. Other than Fellblade, all those skills that generate Fury also generate souls, and so because of this, consuming Fury and souls is linked. Now I'll talk about how you use Spirit Bomb and Soul Cleave in AoE, because that is the more complicated part. You want to use Spirit Bomb when you have 4 or 5 soul fragments available. You want to use Soul Cleave to spend extra Fury when you have 0 soul fragments available, and that is the key on how you use your 2 spenders. When you have a bunch, Spirit Bomb. When you don't have any, Soul Cleave. The cap on active fragments is 5, so if you're at 4 or 5, you don't want to generate more fragments, you just want to burn them up with Spirit Bomb. If you have leftover Fury immediately after casting a Spirit Bomb, that is when you would use Soul Cleave to dump out that Fury. The key to playing Demon Hunter well is making sure you're never actively wasting resources or cooldowns. This means you want to maintain Sigil of Flames as much as possible, use Immolation Aura anytime it's available, and use Fellblade and Fracture anytime that they are available, and also wouldn't cap you on Fury or Souls. In single target, the rotation is a lot simpler. You pretty much just use Soul Cleave to dump all your Fury, you generate Fury, you consume it with Soul Cleave, that's it. Pretty much the easiest tank you could imagine. Demon Spikes is your main defensive skill. It's really simple. You press it and then you are more tanky, that's it. Your offensive cooldowns are very strong and they add a lot of damage when used well. One of the big skills that separates good Demon Hunter players from great ones is timing cooldowns correctly, and most of that comes down to making sure you've gotten a bunch of Frailty stacks onto enemies before hitting them with your offensive cooldowns. Now, if you're in a Mythic Plus setup and you're not running Frailty, then this won't apply and you can pretty much just let them fly all the time. But in raids or in Mythic Plus situations where you are using Frailty, then you want to kind of get a handful of Frailty stacks, ideally 6 or more, before you use skills like Fiery Brand, The Hunt, Sigil of Spite, and so on. Fiery Brand functions like the Demon Hunter Shield Wall. It grants 40% damage reduction against debuffed enemies. Its duration is extended by Immolation Aura, and it spreads to nearby enemies every second due to burning alive. It is a single target cooldown, which is very weird, but then it spreads. So it will cover the entirety of enemy packs, but it takes a little bit of time to propagate out throughout all of the monsters. It also deals a lot of damage, and it applies a huge damage buff, 50% more fire damage, and most of the damage you deal is fire, so close to 40% more damage, which is pretty great. You also have Fell Devastation, which is a combination of an offensive and defensive cooldown, and because it heals you for a lot and grants you 6 seconds of Metamorphosis, your biggest defensive cooldown, you kind of want to treat it like a defensive and offensive cooldown of its own. You want to use Fell Dev as much as you can, and if you're at the end of a pull, that is generally when I would hold on to some of these defensive and offensive cooldowns to kind of use them to establish early threat in the next pull. Otherwise, I kind of just let them fly. Sigil of Spite, as I mentioned already, is the new name for Elysian Decree. It functions exactly the same, but, better name. The Hunt is another simple but strong offensive cooldown. It has a short cast, and then you dash to the target, doing a ton of single target damage and applying a decent-sized dot to everything that you dashed through along the way. You also get a huge leech bonus against the primary target, and that's good too. Metamorphosis is your main big defensive cooldown. It is a massive boost to health and to armor, and it is only on a 2-minute cooldown, so it's useful for basically any defensive purpose. It's good as a proactive skill to use before a big boss hit, it's good to use as a mitigation tool when you're about to take a bunch of damage at the start of a big pull, and it's good to use as a reactive defensive cooldown if your health suddenly falls. You suddenly drop low, meta is a good reactive skill. Meta also makes your Fracture cast generate an extra soul and 20 more Fury, so even your most defensive cooldown has a major offensive bonus added onto it. Demon Hunters, even at their worst, they're still pretty cool. Now I'm going to talk about how to pull an Vengeance Demon Hunter. Holding threat in AoE on a Demon Hunter is pretty easy if you have cooldowns available, but it's kind of rough if you don't. I generally open by Infernal Striking onto the edge of a pack, not into the middle of the pack, but more toward the edge, so that enemies don't surround me. They're all in front of me. While I'm in the air, I want to hit Demon Spikes and Immolation Aura as I reach the pack. You want a Sigil of Flame as well. If it's possible, you could Sigil of Flame first and then leap in before it has gone off. That is a possibility, but that's a little fiddly. If it's a decent sized pack and you'd have enough Fury once you've done that initial leap in, you want to, if you have 4 or 5 souls from Immolation Auraing on them, you can hit Spirit Bomb. If you don't have 4 or 5 souls yet, you can Fracture once or maybe twice and then Spirit Bomb, and that should be usually all you need to establish threat. There is a bit of an annoying bug with Sigil of Flame that'll cause the initial hit to not generate threat if it hits enemies that you're not in combat with already, and this sucks. You can throw it onto a pack as you're leaping into melee range, and if you hit them before it goes off, it'll still work, but it's funky. It's definitely annoying, not super fun to play with, but something you get the hang of with time. As for stats, agility is your strongest stat, so you want to maximize your item level whenever you can. In terms of secondary stats, they're all fairly decent. Haste and crit are kind of generally the best too, but versatility is also pretty good. Okay, it's time to wrap things up here. Demon Hunter was absolutely dominant through the back half of Dragonflight. It does now feel as though it is being punished a bit heading into the War Within as a result, and this is kind of disappointing to me. I like Demon Hunter. They're usually a pretty good tank in Mythic Plus, but never great in raids. Instead of getting a chance to shine in raids, which I would love for that to finally happen, it appears that they're just being shuffled back down into the middle of the Mythic Plus pack with nothing really to look forward to. I think they're on track for a repeat of Dragonflight. Not a bad tank, but not great. Therefore deemed unplayable by the WoW community until they get an insane mid-expansion buff that makes them so strong they completely dominate the game and ruin it for everyone else. But hopefully they're just, pretty good. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.